morning. Today I'm going to discuss diabetes and breath analysis. Diabetes begins with a condition called insulin resistance, which is caused by elevated free fatty acids and intramyocellular lipids. The accumulation of free fatty acids and intramyocellular fat results from impaired fat burn efficiency by our cells and or weight gain, simply being in a calorie surplus. Breath examination provides an excellent tool for tracking fat burning efficacy and the likelihood of obesity. Unfortunately, diabetes is as common as it is misunderstood. Although prediabetes and diabetes are among the most common conditions, many of us, including doctors and health professionals, are utterly oblivious to their origin. As a result, we may claim that diabetes is a lifestyle disease, but we cannot put our fingers on what exactly in our lifestyle causes it. In this presentation, I'm going to clearly explain the biological impacts of diabetes and how breath analysis provides an excellent tool for predicting its onset. So, what is diabetes? Metabolism is the process by which our bodies transform the nutrients we eat into the energy we need to maintain essential functions, heartbeat, brain function, etc. Regulate our body temperature and perform physical activities, move and exercise. Fat and carbohydrates are the two most commonly used nutrients in this metabolic process, and thus supply more than 90% of the body's energy daily. Although both macronutrients are used in significant amounts throughout the day, the process by which they are being treated varies vastly. This difference stems from the way they are stored. On one hand, our body can store practically unlimited amounts of fat in the form of adipose tissue. That is, the fat accumulated around our abdomen, back, and other areas throughout the body. But on the other hand, we have the ability to store only a minimal amount of carbohydrates. So, to put things into perspective, the average person may store up to 30,000 calories worth of fat, which can increase tremendously by becoming overweight or obese, but can only store approximately 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. The limited ability of our body to store carbohydrates ultimately means that whenever ingested, they need to be used immediately, stored in our small carbohydrate reserves, or converted into fat through a process called deoneolipogenesis. Since the second pathway is unlikely and the third one energetically costly, the immediate burn of carbohydrates is what our bodies will resort to when we ingest them. So now let's look into the process by which our body burns carbohydrates. Much like fats, carbohydrates need to reach the inner part of our cells to be processed by our mitochondria, our body's energy factory that converts fat or carbohydrates into the calories we use to survive and move. To achieve this, the following process takes place. Initially, carbohydrates need to be converted into glucose, which begins in our mouth, but primarily happens in our small intestine. Glucose is absorbed by the intestine membrane, enters the bloodstream, and is transferred to the liver, where it is used, stored, or directed to other parts of the body. When it enters our muscle mass to be stored for future use, it is converted into glycogen. As glucose levels rise in the blood, our body reacts through a secretion of insulin, a hormone which is required for managing glucose across our organs. Specifically, insulin is a substance that latches onto glucose molecules and enables them to enter into the cells, thus clearing them from the bloodstream. It is necessary because although glucose is a variable nutrient that provides useful energy, it can be toxic for our organs if it remains in the bloodstream for too long. The toxic effect of lingering glucose in the blood slowly degrades all form of tissue and can cause heart disease, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and in advanced cases, even require amputation of one's leg. As a result, once glucose enters the bloodstream from the membranes of our small intestine, it needs to be stored in the liver or used by the working muscles immediately. Our body uses the hormone insulin, which is secreted from our pancreas, to enable glucose to enter our livers and muscle cells. This is where the root of diabetes lies. Specifically, diabetes occurs if our pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin or our cells are not responsive enough to it. It's a condition is known as insulin resistance. So what causes diabetes? Diabetes is a confluence of two conditions: cells becoming non-responsive to insulin and the pancreas not producing enough insulin. The combined effect of the two phenomenon is that the insulin production cannot clear glucose from the bloodstream. The lingering glucose thus causes widespread deterioration of all tissue across our bodies. Although both conditions need to coexist for diabetes to occur, their onset is not simultaneous but sequential. The first of the two conditions is insulin resistance, caused by excessive accumulation of intramyocellular lipids and plasma-free fatty acids. Intramyocellular lipids are essentially the fat stores found within muscles, whereas free fatty acids are fat molecules circulating in the bloodstream. And the common denominator between the two is that they cause cells to become less responsive to insulin and thus cause insulin resistance. These two conditions occur when overall fat accumulation across the body increases, or in other words, when one starts to transition from the average weight to an obese or overweight state. Our bodies compensate for the fact that cells are now less responsive to insulin. The pancreas of an individual within this early stages of insulin resistance starts to increase more insulin. This sets a person's pancreas into a constant state of overdrive, meaning that it is constantly operating above its normal capacity. It is so important to note, however, that this doesn't always lead to pancreatic failure or insulin secretion shutdown. As a matter of fact, nearly 80% of obese and overweight individuals live in the state where their pancreas is secreting excessive insulin in order to compensate for their varying degrees of insulin resistance. This state is also known as hyperinsulinemia. However, in the case of hyperinsulinemia, leads to a partial or complete pancreatic failure, then the insulin levels drop sharply. Circulating blood glucose has no way of penetrating the cells, and ultimately the lingering blood glucose starts to cause its negative effects on the body. This is when the onset of type 2 diabetes happens. And it is evident that fat accumulation is the underlying driver of type 2 diabetes. This is corroborated by every piece of longitudinal data about the disease and its correlations with obesity levels. Specifically, type 2 diabetes started to become a health concern and subsequently a dire epidemic at the same time that people began gaining weight. Given that obesity is founded in our unhealthy nutrition habits and lack of physical activity, it is undeniable fact that type 2 diabetes is exclusively a disease of our modern lifestyle and is totally 100% dependent on the fact that we are not able to utilize that glucose in our cells, and it is a lack of muscle. Now let's talk about the myth of carbs causing diabetes and fat treating it. The nature of type 2 diabetes is and how it is rooted in weight gain and fat accumulation sheds light onto the fact that macronutrient composition of one's diet is irrelevant. In other words, following a low carb, high fat, or low fat, high carb diet can't cause or cure type 2 diabetes. Humans have followed all kinds of diets ranging from almost exclusively fat and animal protein based to almost solely carb ones. Despite the wide range of diets followed by our ancestors, diabetes never became a health concern until obesity came along. As a result, weight loss and reignition of cells' insulin sensitivity through physical exercise to insulin are the only ways through which one can mitigate the effects of type 2 diabetes, or in some cases, even cure it. How the breath analysis device with PNOE analyzes provides early warning signs for diabetes. As explained earlier, diabetes begins with insulin resistance, starts to occur due to toxins secreted by free fatty acids, and intramyocellular lipid accumulation. These toxins affect the cell's ability to respond to insulin and thus prevent them from being able to absorb glucose that is circulating in the blood. In simple words, when insulin resistance occurs, insulin becomes less effective as the key for glucose to enter cells. Therefore, to uncover the origins of insulin resistance, we must first understand the root cause of fat accumulation. Specifically, the buildup of these molecules can be traced back to two factors: reduced ability to burn fat. Fat is a fuel source that requires oxygen to be burnt, as well as higher mitochondrial density compared to carbohydrates. Simply put, it requires well training mitochondria, as it is a more complex fuel to process. Lack of exercise or constant consumption of high glycemic index carbs will gradually reduce mitochondrial density, making your cells less able to burn fat as fuel source. Less fat oxidation means a higher concentration of intramyocellular lipids and free fatty acids in the blood. Obesity and visceral fat. Adipose tissue, in other words, accumulated body fat, impacts metabolism by inducing the release of hormones and other substances, including leptin, cytokines, adipectin, and pro-inflammatory substances. Other essential substances are released in the process of these fatty. Individuals who are obese or overweight have even higher than average FFAs circulating in the blood. Out of these substances, adipose tissues release that affect insulin sensitivity the most are FFAs. These higher levels of circulating FFAs, the higher the insulin resistance, and thus the likelihood of type 2 diabetes. Both phenomena can be traced or predicted through breath analysis. Specifically, the ability to utilize oxygen and burn fat at rest is assessed in the most accurate way possible by analyzing the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide in the breath, also known as respiratory exchange ratio. Studies have also proven this concept by showing that reduced fat oxidation at rest is a risk factor for diabetes even before the onset of elevated blood sugar levels during a fasted state, a condition also known as prediabetes. Moreover, the likelihood of obesity can be accurately assessed by determining the metabolic level of an individual. In other words, whether one's metabolism is faster or slower than expected based on your age, gender, body size. The gold standard for analyzing a person's metabolism is always breath analysis. So, in conclusion, diabetes is undeniably a lifestyle disease that stems from physical inactivity and poor nutrition habits. Combined, they lead to impaired cellular oxygen uptake ability and fat accumulation, leading to the onset of insulin resistance. As a result, addressing diabetes through nutrition and exercise should be a priority for everyone looking to avoid it or to overcome it. If you need any assistance in developing a customized program, please reach out to me. My cell number is 352-425-8431, and I'll be happy to get you tested with the PNOE. And if you want to learn how to integrate this into your clinic, again, I'd be happy to connect you with the appropriate people over at PNOE and talk to you about how I've used it with my client. Have a great day.